Look around this room, Jae-Hyun. You gave me luxury. You think I betrayed you? Look around this room, Jae-Hyun. I didn't fall for him for power. He was the only one. He actually listened to me.
The grand exhibition hall of the Seoul Art Museum had never been this quiet. 200 syndicate bosses, politicians, and high society snakes held their breath. Champagne glasses were frozen mid-air. And at the center of the marble floor stood Dr. Amara Vaughn in an elegant red gown, not crying, not screaming, but looking at her husband dead in the eye with a truth that echoed off the high glass ceiling. You think I betrayed you with Min-seok? Amara's voice didn't shake. It was heavy with the quiet grief of a woman who had spent 3 years dying inside a golden cage. Look around this room, Jae-Hyun. She said, you gave me the kind of luxury any woman would crave for. You gave me security, you gave me a name. But you made me a ghost in my own home. A woman doesn't wander when she's seen. I didn't fall for your bodyguard because he had power. I fell because when I spoke, he was the only man in this house who actually listened. Silence suffocated the room. Jae-Hyun didn't feel remorse. He felt the humiliating sting of a fragile ego caught completely exposed. For all his vast wealth and power, he stood there looking utterly hollow. His pride, inflated by 3 years of unshakable Mafia dominance, and couldn't digest the humiliation. He didn't offer a private room. He didn't try to make a second thoughts on his. Instead, he stepped up to the podium microphone, set his crystal glass on a passing tray, and addressed his entire empire with ice in his veins. Effective tonight, Jae-Hyun's voice boomed through the speakers. Dr. Amara Vaughn's marriage to the Kang estate is terminated. She leaves with nothing. Moving forward, Yoon Jae stands beside me as my wife. The crowd didn't gasp, they smirked. Whispers rippled through the hall like acid as Jae stepped into the spotlight beside him, wearing the Kang family crest and a smile rehearsed for months. Amara's knees gave out, just an inch. Out, everything went blurry for a second. Before she could hit the marble, a broad, warm hand caught her elbow. Lee Min-seok, the head of security who had just been stripped of his badge, stepped between her and 200 staring eyes. I've got you, Min-seok whispered, his rough voice a shield against the room. Don't let them see you break, Amara, walk out with me. She didn't look back at Jae-Hyun. She simply leaned into the only man who had ever truly seen her and let him lead her out into the night. If you're joining us for the first time, here is what you missed in the previous episode. For 3 years, Dr. Amara Vaughn was the dutiful black wife to Kang Jae-Hyun, a ruthless Korean casino mogul who gave her everything money could buy, except the one thing a marriage needs to survive: attention. Drowning in neglect, Amara found solace in the quiet, fierce protection of his head bodyguard, Lee Min-seok. But when Jae-Hyun's toxic ex, Yoon Jae, discovered their silent bond, she used it to weaponize Jae-Hyun's arrogance. Jae-Hyun thought he was executing justice by publicly throwing Amara into the gutter and marrying Jae. But what Jae-Hyun didn't realize was that Jae didn't want his heart, she wanted his casino empire. Jae pulled the ultimate modern divorce trap, marrying him, gaining access to his ports and board seats, and filing for divorce 4 months later to claim 50% of his entire fortune, leaving Jae-Hyun financially ruined, emotionally gutted, and sitting alone in an empty mansion. Stories like this aren't just about watching a man lose his money, they're about watching a woman remember exactly who she is. If you're here to see Amara rise from the ashes, take a single second to tap subscribe below and lock into our inner circle. Because in this final chapter, Kang Jae-Hyun is about to learn the hard way. He traded a loyal woman who only wanted his time for a snake who took half his life. And while his empire burns to the ground, Amara is about to rebuild hers from scratch. The heavy glass doors of the Seoul Art Museum shut behind them, cutting off the loud whispers of 200 rich guests. Amara didn't collapse until the door of the black BMW clicked closed. Min-seok didn't ask her if she was okay. He knew better than to offer cheap pity. He simply handed her a clean handkerchief and kept his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Inside the museum, high above the grand exhibition hall in a private VIP suite, Kang Jae-Hyun stood by the tall glass windows. He didn't watch her car drive away. That would show hesitation, and men like him don't hesitate. Instead, he walked to his desk, picked up a silver pen and uncapped it with a single click. On the desk lay the divorce papers. No talks, no splitting money, just cutting her off completely. Tae-woo, his right-hand man, stood quietly by the door. "Sir, the board is already asking questions about Dr. Vaughn leaving the gala like that. Should we issue a formal statement?" Jae-Hyun didn't look up from his signature. "There is nothing to say. Dr. Vaughn was a mistake in this family and mistakes get removed." He capped the pen, slid the paper across the desk, and gave his final order. "Deliver it to her room at dawn, and make sure Minseok's security badge is turned off before sunrise." Jae-Hyun thought he was just closing a business file. He had no idea this single decision would end up destroying everything he owned. Because when dawn broke over the city, his cold order arrived on a silver tray. The morning coffee arrived in Amara's room right on schedule. The aroma of dark roast filled the suite, warm and inviting, except sitting directly beside the porcelain cup was a thick, cream-coloured envelope bearing the golden Kang family seal. Jae-Hyun hadn't come himself. He didn't step through the doorway to face the woman who had spent 3 years stitching his emotional wounds in the dark. Instead, he sent his assistant, a young man who couldn't even bring himself to look Amara in the eye. "Mr. Kang asks that you review these terms," the assistant murmured, his gaze fixed on the mahogany floorboards. "A lump sum settlement has been deposited into a private account. You have 7 days to vacate the grounds." Amara didn't touch the coffee. She sat on the edge of the bed, a bed that had never once felt like hers, and let her fingertips brush the raised wax seal on the envelope. "And Minseok," her voice was a quiet thread stripped of all armor. "Mr. Lee's contract was terminated effective 4 a.m., the assistant replied softly. "His security escort off the property was completed 2 hours ago." Something inside Amara died right there, and something else, far colder and far more resilient, was born in its place. She slid the ring next to the untouched coffee cup. "Tell Jae-Hyun he can keep his money," she said, her voice dropping into a register so steady it startled the assistant. "I came into this house with my own name, and that is the only thing I am taking with me when I leave." She pulled her single suitcase toward the doorway, but as she stepped outside the parking lots to make her exit, the house was already whispering about the woman moving into her space before her seat was even cold. The servants didn't notice Amara standing at the top of the stairs, or maybe they just thought she was too broken to care. "They're announcing the new engagement by Friday," a maid whispered, wiping down a wall lamp. "The jewelers are already bringing in diamond rings for Lady Jae. Before the divorce papers are even signed," another whispered back. "Mr. Kang doesn't wait for paperwork, he gets what he wants." Amara paused on the stairs, her fingers tightening around the handle of her bag. A year ago, those words would have crushed her, making her wonder why 3 years of real love meant nothing to him. But as a trained therapist, Amara looked past their cruel words and saw the truth. Jae-Hyun hadn't left her for love, he didn't even know what love was. He had traded a wife who asked for his time and his heart, for a woman who only cared about deals, money and power. Amara walked past the whispering staff with her head held high, stepped out through the front gates, and got into the waiting taxi without looking back once. Jae-Hyun thought he won, he thought he made the smart move. What he didn't realize was that Amara was leaving his world far behind, while the snake he brought into his house was already planning to steal half his empire. If you're waiting to see Kang Jae-Hyun realize the terrible mistake he just made, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications right now. Because Amara isn't staying down, and her comeback starts right now. She crossed an ocean and settled in a quiet American city where nobody knew the Kang name. The first 3 months didn't feel like a comeback, they felt like survival. Amara lived in a 3rd-floor walk-up apartment with peeling wallpaper, 2 second-hand chairs, and a phone she refused to answer because every unknown caller sent a spike of panic straight to her chest. At night, the woman who had spent years analyzing other people's minds couldn't stop her own from running in circles. She sat on the cold linoleum floor of her kitchen, staring at the dark walls, replaying every single interaction from the estate. She pulled out an old black notebook and wrote a single sentence under the flickering overhead light. "I thought being useful was the same thing as being loved. I mistook his reliance on me for affection for 3 long years." She stared at those words until the ink dried. Jae-Hyun hadn't valued her, he had utilized her. She was a haven when he had insomnia, a steady mind when his syndicate was at war, and a trophy when he needed respectability. But the second she asked for his heart, his attention, she became an inconvenience. Amara closed the notebook and never opened it again, She stopped skipping meals, and every morning she washed away the memory of the life she left behind. Amara wasn't just surviving anymore. She was quietly preparing for a rebirth that no empire could ever take away from her. The new office didn't smell like marble, expensive scotch, or syndicate cigars. It smelled like fresh cedar, lavender, and the sweet scent of cinnamon rising from the bakery on the ground floor every morning at 7. Amara stood in the center of the small room, holding a framed piece of parchment. It was her reinstated license to practice clinical psychology, signed, sealed, and legally restored under her birth name, Dr. Amara Vaughn. Her hands didn't shake as she drove the nail into the plaster. She hung the diploma directly across from 2 comfortable armchair seats. No security cameras, no wiretaps, no guards standing outside the door with loaded weapons, just a quiet room built for healing. She sat behind her simple oak desk, picked up her pen, and opened her first blank client logbook. She wasn't rich anymore. She didn't drive a sports car provided by a Mafia empire, and she didn't wear designer silk dresses to gala dinners. But when she looked in the desk mirror, the hollow look in her eyes was completely gone. She had her name back, she had her mind back, and she belonged entirely to herself. 2 gentle knocks landed on the frosted glass office door. Amara set her pen down, adjusted her lapel, and looked toward the door with a calm, professional smile. She expected her first patient to be a local resident, but she never expected to see her own past staring back at her from across the desk. The moment 26-year-old Priya stepped inside, she locked the door. Then she walked over to the window and closed the blinds. She turned around, her chest heaving, her eyes darting frantically across the ceiling corners, searching for hidden lenses. Amara's hand subtly drifted toward the desk drawer. For 3 terrifying seconds her heart hammered against her ribs. Did Jae-Hyun find her? Was this a syndicate hit? The thought kept ringing through her mind. "My husband has cameras in our house," Priya gasped, her voice trembling as she pressed her back against the door. "This is the only room in the state where nobody is watching me." Amara slowly let out her breath, taking her hand off the drawer. "You're safe here, Priya," Amara said softly. "No cameras, no microphones, just us." Priya walked slowly toward the armchair, her arms crossed tight over her chest, sitting right on the very edge. "I don't even know why I'm sitting here," Priya whispered, her voice tight with shame. "My husband isn't a bad guy, Dr. Vaughn. He doesn't hit me, he doesn't yell. He buys me whatever I want." Amara kept her posture calm, her pen hovering over her notepad. "But..." Priya's jaw worked silently for a moment before her eyes welled with tears. "But I feel like a ghost in my own house. He looks through me, he gives me an allowance, but he never gives me the attention I crave as his lover," she said, feeling sober. Amara's hand went completely still. The room went dead silent. A phantom chill ran straight down Amara's spine, the exact same trauma she had lived through for 3 years inside the Kang estate. She was looking at her own ghost sitting in that chair. Amara gently set her pen down, leaned forward, and looked Priya straight in the eyes. "He isn't giving you security, Priya," Amara said, her voice carrying quiet, devastating authority. "He's paying you to be quiet." As Priya broke down in tears, Amara realized the clinical truth that was about to shatter Jae-Hyun's entire life from 2 states away. Amara didn't just see a patient in that chair, she saw the ghost of her past self. And if you know what it feels like to realize your worth the hard way, you know Dr. Amara Vaughn isn't staying down for long. Become part of the community by subscribing right now, because Amara's quiet room is about to send shockwaves all the way back to the empire that threw her away. The therapy session with Priya continued for another hour, but every word spoken in that quiet office echoed back into Amara's own soul. "He thinks that if he gives me money, I shouldn't ask for his time," Priya wept, clutching a wet tissue. "He thinks his presence is a gift I should be grateful to receive twice a month." Amara leaned back, setting her pen aside. She didn't offer clinical buzzwords or hollow medical jargon. She gave her patient the raw, brutal truth. "Love isn't a bill paid in advance," Amara said softly, her voice steady and warm. "Safety without attention isn't a marriage, Priya, it's a golden prison. When a woman is starved of presence for long enough, she doesn't turn away because she wants luxury. She turns away because every human being needs to be seen." For the first time in 18 months, Amara didn't feel a lingering sting of shame when she thought about Lee Min-seok. She realized she had never been an unfaithful wife at heart. She was a dying woman reaching for water. Min-seok hadn't bribed her with diamonds or syndicate power. He had simply stood in the rain, looked her in the eye, and listened to her speak. Priya wiped her tears and smiled through her pain. "How do you know all of this, Dr. Vaughn?" Amara looked out the window at the soft afternoon light. "Because I married a man who gave me everything money could buy, except his time, and I had to lose everything to realize I was allowed to ask for it." And while Amara finally healed her heart in that quiet office, across the ocean, Kang Jae-Hyun was about to learn what happens when you marry a woman who doesn't want your heart at all. Inside the dark, high-rise skyscraper overlooking the rain-soaked city, there were no fine wine glasses or soft jazz. Standing by the window was Baron Corbin, towering, broad-shouldered and draped in a dark leather jacket with roll-up sleeves exposing heavy ink. He tossed back a glass of straight bourbon, his jaw set, looking down at the flickering city lights like a predator surveying his territory. Behind him, Yoon Jae leaned against the leather sofa, watching him with a ruthless smirk. "Jae-Hyun called 3 times from the docks," Jae said, her voice dripping with venom. "He actually believes I'm sitting at home playing the timid, obedient wife." Corbin didn't even turn around. He let out a low, booming laugh that rattled the glass in his hand. "That suit-wearing joke actually thinks he runs this city," Corbin growled, his deep voice carrying pure, unfiltered swagger. "He walks around in $4,000 tailored suits thinking he's a kingpin, but he's blind. A real man protects his house and keeps his eyes open. He couldn't even keep his first wife happy, and now he doesn't even notice me standing in his shadow." Corbin turned around, his imposing frame blocking out the light from the window as he stepped toward her. "Tomorrow at noon," Jae whispered, her eyes locking onto his. "The Macau casino license clears government approval. By 2 o'clock, my legal team hits him with the divorce." "Grounds of emotional neglect," Corbin smirked, a dangerous glint in his eyes. "The exact same way he broke his black wife," Jae said. "Under the joint trust, I take 50% of everything, the casino, the ports, and his board seats." Corbin leaned down, placing both massive hands on the arms of her chair, trapping her in his space with absolute authority. $300 million in liquid assets, Corbin whispered, his voice dropping into a heavy, lethal rumble. "He spent 3 years treating a loyal woman like trash for free. Now he's going to hand us half his empire just to watch us walk away together." He picked up his glass, pointing it straight at the city skyline. "Here's to Jae-Hyun's pride," Corbin spat. "The single stupidest thing he ever owned." Jae smiled as Corbin downed the whiskey, knowing that by tomorrow afternoon, Kang Jae-Hyun's entire world was going to get crushed into dust. Kang Jae-Hyun's marriage to Yoon Jae lasted exactly 4 months and 11 days, but the divorce wasn't the first mistake he made. The first mistake happened 3 weeks before the wedding. Jae had told him the Macau casino license needed a second beneficial owner to clear government regulations, and she offered herself as the joint co-signatory. She had placed a thick restructuring agreement in front of him during a private dinner. "Once you sign this," Jae had whispered, resting her hand over his, "the Macau authorities will see us as equal partners. It makes the approval automatic." Jae-Hyun hadn't bothered to read the fine print. Why would he? He was so drunk on his own mafia dominance that he never believed a woman could outmaneuver him. He picked up his silver pen and signed his name across every page. He saw a simple corporate formality. Jae and her lover, Baron Corbin, saw a loaded gun. 4 months and 11 days later, that pen stroke came back to collect its debt. Tiwoo stood in Jae-Hyun's private study, his face ash-white, holding a stack of served court injunctions.
"She trapped us, Jae-Hyun. She trapped you. Joint trust, half the casino revenues, port rights."
Jae-Hyun stared down at the documents as the color drained from his face. "She isn't just divorcing you, she's enforcing the spousal asset clause you signed before the wedding." Jae-Hyun's eyes slowly drifted to the bottom of the page, to his own signature. He hadn't been robbed by force. He had voluntarily handed half his empire to a viper, all because he was too arrogant to see he was being played. And as dawn broke over the city, Kang Jae-Hyun sat alone in his mansion, beginning to realize the catastrophic price of trading loyalty for a trophy. The silence inside the Kang estate was deafening. There were no guests, no servants whispering in the hallways, and no high heels tapping across the marble floors. Just Kang Jae-Hyun, sitting alone in his sprawling mahogany office with a half-empty bottle of scotch. 4 months ago, this house was filled with warmth, quiet dignity, and a woman who patched his wounds without asking for a dime. Now, every corner echoed with nothing. Tiwoo stood near the doorway, watching the man who used to command the entire city's underworld look completely broken. "Should I call security to lock down the penthouse in Monaco?" Ti-woo asked quietly. Yi-hyun didn't answer. He stared down at his desk, at the empty space where Dr. Amara Vaughn's medical books used to sit. She didn't love me for a single second, did she? Yi-hyun muttered, his voice raspy and hollow. Ti-woo hesitated, then delivered the final, painful truth. Doctor, Vaughn begged you for your time, sir, Ti-woo said softly. Jae only begged you for your signature. You traded a woman who wanted your heart for a predator who wanted your empire. Yi-hyun closed his eyes as the weight of his own arrogance crushed him. He thought throwing Amara away was just business. He had no idea that while his house was burning down, the doctor he discarded was about to become the only person on Earth who could save him. Yoon Jae thought taking 50% of the Kang Empire was her final victory. But on a rainy Thursday night, her team of high-priced forensic accountants hit a brick wall. Deep inside the syndicate's master financial structure lay the Macau casino vault access codes, the real crown jewel worth hundreds of millions in liquid capital. But Yi-hyun hadn't registered those vault keys under his name or Jae's. Years ago, during the height of a federal tax audit, Yi-hyun had locked those master vault keys inside an irrevocable spousal trust, registered exclusively under the legal identity of Dr. Amara Vaughn. Jae's eyes burned with cold rage as her lead attorney delivered the news. Unless Dr. Vaughn physically signs the spousal release form, the lawyer explained, those vault funds remain frozen forever. Not even Yi-hyun can touch them. Jae didn't waste time throwing a tantrum. She was a predator, and predators do not negotiate when they can take. She opened a secure satellite laptop and pulled up a private investigator's file, containing the exact address of a small psychology practice 2 states away, sitting above a quiet cinnamon bakery. Send 2 fixers to her practice tonight, Jae ordered. Her voice like ice scraping over glass. I don't care if you bribe her, threaten her practice, or break into her files. Get her signature on that release form before sunrise. Yoon Jae thinks she just cornered a quiet doctor in a small town. What she doesn't realize is that Amara never truly walked alone, and someone lethal is watching that street from the shadows. All it takes is a single tap on the subscribe button below to signal that you're with us on this journey, because what happens in this dark alley next is a lesson Jae's fixers will never forget. Envelope arrived at 7 p.m. just as Amara was locking up her clinic for the evening. It was tucked under the brass doorknob, a heavy manila folder containing copies of her old estate spousal trust documents, alongside a handwritten note from Jae's legal team. Sign the vault release by midnight, or face an anonymous complaint to the state medical board that will destroy your practice overnight. Amara's hands didn't shake as she read the threat. 3 years ago, a message like this would have sent her heart racing into her throat. She would have panicked, reached out to Yi-hyun, or tried to fix things to keep the peace. Instead, Dr. Amara Vaughn sat behind her desk, pulled out her red pen and began dissecting the legal document line by line with clinical precision. She saw the desperation between the lines. Jae wasn't attacking out of strength, she was attacking because she was trapped. Without Amara's signature, Jae was holding half an empire with no cash flow to back it up. Amara picked up her phone, dialed the state prosecutor's extortion hotline, and prepared to log the threat. What Amara didn't know was that Jae's fixers were already parked across the street in a black SUV, and a shadow was moving toward them in the dark. The black SUV idling outside the bakery didn't stay running for long. Inside the vehicle, 2 of Jae's private fixers were adjusting their earpieces, waiting for the streetlights to shut off before moving upstairs to confront Amara. They never got the chance. The driver's door was yanked open from the outside. Before the fixer could reach for his jacket pocket, a massive, calloused hand locked around his throat, dragging him straight out onto the wet asphalt. Lee Min-seok didn't shout. He didn't make a scene. Wearing a heavy black trench coat drenched in rain, his eyes cold and lethal, Min-seok disarmed the second man in 3 precise, brutal movements, pinning both operatives against the brick alley wall before they could even draw their weapons. Who sent you? Min-seok's voice was a low growl that cut through the sound of the rain. The driver choked out a breath. Jae, Lady Jae, she just wants the signature. Min-seok squeezed tighter, his jaw set like iron. If I see this car on this street again, Jae won't have to worry about vault keys. She'll have to worry about surviving the week. Sirens wailing softly in the far distance. He threw both men into the vehicle, watched them speed away into the night, and wiped the rain from his face. He checked his coat pocket, ensuring his badge and credentials were in place, then turned toward the bakery stairs. He walked up the wooden steps, stood outside her office door, and raised his hand to knock 3 distinct times. Amara maintained her composure at the sound. She stood up from her desk, walked across the warm hardwood floor, and pulled the heavy door open. Standing on the landing, drenched in rain with his coat collar turned up against the chill, was Lee Min-seok. His broad shoulders filled the entryway. His dark eyes, usually cold and guarded, softened the second they locked onto hers. He didn't step inside immediately. He respected her space too much for that. He simply stood there, breathing steadily, ensuring she was unharmed. "SUV across the street is gone," Min-seok said, his voice a low, soothing vibration that filled the quiet clinic. "They won't be coming back." Amara stared at him. It had been nearly 2 years since she had last seen his face in the chaotic glow of that ballroom. "Why did you come back?" "Min-seok," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly with an emotion she had suppressed for far too long. "You could have called." Min-seok stepped across the threshold, closing the cedar door softly behind him, cutting off the noise of the rainy street. "I decided to show up," he said in a soft and romantic tone. "Because the first time you needed me, I was standing 10 feet away. This time I wanted to be close enough. I came because I wanted to see your face. I've never needed a reason to protect you." Amara reached out, her fingers resting lightly against his chest, feeling the deep, steady rhythm of his heartbeat under the damp fabric. For 3 years in the Kang estate, she had lived in constant survival mode. Standing in front of Min-seok, she didn't feel like a tool. She felt seen. And with Min-seok standing firmly at her back, Amara was finally ready to deliver the legal death blow that would destroy Jae once and for all. Amara didn't wait for Jae to make another move. At 8 a.m. the following morning, armed with the physical extortion files left at her clinic and Min-seok's intelligence on Jae's offshore shell companies, Amara walked directly into the federal prosecutor's office. She wasn't running. She wasn't begging for mercy. She sat across from state prosecutors and handed over 3 years of financial anomalies she had archived during her time at the estate, including the exact evidence proving Jae had committed corporate wire fraud to secure the Macau casino licenses. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, federal agents swarmed Yoon Jae's penthouse suite. The media cameras caught every second of it. Jae, dressed in designer silk, being led out of her skyscraper in steel handcuffs, her face pale with shock as reporters shouted questions about grand larceny and extortion. In a single morning, her 50% claim on the Kang Empire evaporated into a federal asset forfeiture case. Back in his empty mansion, Kang Jae-Hyun watched the news broadcast on a massive TV screen. He sat in total silence as he watched the woman he traded Amara for dragged away in shame. He had lost his reputation, his casino keys, and half his board seats, all because he thought loyalty was something you could buy and trade on an exchange. And 6 months later, as the dust settled over the ruined empire, Jae-Hyun made one last desperate journey to see the woman he had thrown away. Watching a multi-million-dollar empire crumble under its own greed hits completely different when you were the one they underestimated. If you stood by Amara when she left that estate with nothing but a single bag, all it takes is a single tap on the subscribe button below to join our inner circle. Later in the day, a black BMW with dark windows sat parked across the street from a small psychology practice above a bakery. Inside the car, sitting in the back seat, was Kang Jae-Hyun. He looked older. The powerful man who had once ruled the city now looked like a broken man in an expensive suit. He had driven 2 states over just to see Amara one last time. At 5 p.m., the wooden door of the practice opened. Amara stepped out into the golden light of the late afternoon sun. She wore a simple cream sweater, her dark hair glowing and her face calm, relaxed and truly happy. She wasn't looking at her phone. She wasn't looking over her shoulder. She was smiling. Beside her, holding her coat, was Lee Mun-suk. Jae-Hyun watched from behind the tinted glass as Mun-suk leaned down, said something soft that made Amara laugh out loud and gently took her hand. They walked down the sidewalk together, holding hands, completely wrapped up in their own world. Jae-Hyun's hand rested on the door handle. His heart pounded in his chest. He wanted to step out. He wanted to call her name. He wanted to beg her to look at him just once. But as Amara walked past his car without even looking toward the windows, Jae-Hyun realized the brutal truth. To Dr. Amara Vaughn, he was no longer a villain. He was no longer a husband. He was simply a stranger who didn't exist anymore, as the car window rolled up completely. And the engine starting with a low rumble. He had thrown away a genuine diamond for broken glass. And now he had to sit alone in the dark, watching another man give her the love he never did. Amara never looked back. She had lost an empire, but she gained her soul, and a man who truly loves her. Now I have to ask you, did Kang Jae-Hyun get what he deserved by watching her walk away, or did he get off too easy? Type justice if you think his empty life is punishment enough, or too easy if he deserved worse. Subscribe for more adventurous stories like this, and I'll see you in the comments.